After introducing all the commanders, it is time to introduce their partners, the units. Let's see. There are 4 quarters of a good faction. Which one should I choose first? As usual, I'll choose the one I like the most. Yeah, and it's also the funniest unit, the Dwarves. Dwarf units are very good. They're like tanks, slow and powerful. Dwarves are also very tough, with a focus on being able to kill other melee enemies. It might as well count as a generalist tactical unit. Their axe throwers can help rip apart melee enemies so that their shield units can march in slowly and roll over all the enemies. Dwarf infantry is the best for the good factions in my opinion, simply because they protect the ranged units and fighters as well. Okay, from the first table, the heavy axe thrower, iron warriors, and master axe thrower have all very high damage outputs, and the dwarven infantry and iron warriors are very good at siege, which means that the iron warriors can be used both as a high damage unit as well as a siege unit. For the other 3 indicators, you can see that the iron warriors are really a tier 4 unit. In all aspects are considered quite excellent. But if you have to say a disadvantage, that is the speed is not quite fast enough. That is if you can also see the tier 1 dwarven footman speed is surprisingly okay. From the third table, you can see that the iron warriors, although strong, are very difficult to conscript both in terms of time and resources. Is there a better alternative for the unit? From the data, the Guardian is a good choice. Go Riders and Ram Riders data are almost the same, but the Ram Riders need more resources, which when choosing the unit more suitable for you is something to think about. It's not always about the higher the level, the better the unit is. For example, if you want to quickly support the guarding of one land, obviously shield bearers are the best choice. Fast, high defense, easy to conscript. However, each unit will also have its own skill additions. So, let's take a look below. Let's look at the Dwarven infantry first. Dwarven troops are generalist meat shields with literal shields, bulky and lacking any real targeted specializations. Slow, they rarely ever get the first hit in, but they'll last longer than the other guys, which are useful in most situations. For Dwarven footmen, the attack type is melee. Let's look at the base stats. As a tier 1 melee unit, all kinds of data are not really good, but it will only be used in the early game. And its siege stats are still quite actually good as well. Siege 18 is better than some tier 2 units. Its skill is Laceration, which can inflict an additional physical damage for 1 round. It is a resistant infantry that can inflict bleed with their axes. They don't have any shields, so they rely on their stats to attack the enemies. The shield bearer is a tier 2 melee unit. Maybe it is actually the first unit with a shield that you will have. So its skill is shielding, which has a chance to reduce physical damage received. They're also very slow, and these are pretty much the Dwarven stereotypes for all the units. They don't have the footman's laceration skill though, so they rely on the axe throwers behind them for the heavy damage. The Guardian is a tier 3 melee unit. It's like a combination of the Dwarven footman as well as the shield bearer. They have 3 skills: laceration, heatproof skin, as well as shielding. The skill that the others don't have is the heatproof skin, which can reduce burn damage received. It is a heavy infantry, and turns out giving laceration to shield bearers was quite a wonderful idea. Now they hit harder, though you're still not going to bring them in to deal the high damages. The Iron Warriors are the tier 4 melee units, and it has 2 skills, Battler's Bane as well as full armor. One can increase damage to melee units and the other can reduce physical damage received. It's a unique airborne elite infantry, heavily armored melee fighters that can counter other melee infantries with the Battler's Bane. The Dwarven axe throwers are pretty dangerous, since they deal heavier damage versus melee units, which is pretty much half of the units in the entire game. Just watch out for the Uruk-hai archers who will focus on hunting them down. They deal high maximum damage but are sometimes quite extremely inconsistent. The axe throwers are a tier 1 ranged unit. Finally, we are onto the ranged units. While other units shoots, the dwarves are quite special. They throw axes. Their skill is Battler's Bane that can increase damage to melee units. It is a ranged infantry equipped with throwing axes, so they're quite slow, but they can counter melee units with their Battler's Bane. Next up is the Heavy Axe Thrower. They are a tier 2 ranged unit and their skills are the same as the axe throwers, who can increase damage to melee units. They are a ranged infantry equipped with bigger axes. Again, they counter melee fighters, which is most of what you'll be fighting anyways. Next up, we have the Master Axe Thrower, which is a tier 3 ranged unit. This is a giant slayer. They can increase damage to large units they fight, and most players are quite fond of using them in the late game, so the Master Axe Thrower are very important for you. It is a ranged unit with experience under the belt, along with even bigger throwing axes. Not only do they have Battler's Bane skill, they also have Giant Slayer. And most large units do melee damage, so it's quite a double whammy for them. Now we'll move on to the Dwarven Cavalry. The Dwarven Cavalry are all very useful, and the tier 3 Ram Riders can reduce the enemy's defense, which is pretty useful as well. They lack a tier 1 cavalry option though, so if you want fast scouts units, you'll have to get some Royalings like cavalry units. Firstly, we have the Goat Riders, which are a tier 2 melee unit. Their speeds are much better than any other Dwarven units. That's because, maybe they ride on some extremely large, angry goats. Its skill is Mounted, which can reduce damage received. The Ram Riders are a tier 3 melee unit. I think it's one of the best units for stats in the Dwarven units. You may say that its defense is not very strong, but it's not a defensive unit. Do you know how hard it is for dwarves to get high speeds? It has 2 skills, Trample that can reduce enemies' defenses and Heatproof Skin that can reduce burn damage received. It is dwarves on even angrier rams, which rams are certainly better than goats. So they have the ability to reduce enemy defense with their Trample skill, which is really good. So guys, this is the introduction of all the Dwarven units. I'll leave the rest for you to explore. And now I have to hurry to choose which units are more suitable for me. So I'll see you in the next video.